Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, Alhamdulillah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, welcome to this very first MDEC iFINTEL collaboration on a series on Islamic FinTech, which I think will be very fruitful to the ecosystem. There will be more of this fruitful events, inshallah, coming up in the next few months. So please keep, subscribe on the mailing list if you have not, and please follow the various social media at iFINTEL and MDEC. We are very pleased and excited to run this kind of events for the ecosystem. I think there are various aspects within the Islamic FinTech ecosystem as well as the FinTech ecosystem at large that needs to be addressed and can be discussed. So this is one of the platforms that we want to be able to reach out to the startup ecosystem especially, and hopefully get the discussion going and then share best known methods or successful strategies that have worked for startups in the past. Okay, so for Islamic FinTech, there are various segments to the FinTech, just like conventional FinTech. Today we are pleased to have two speakers who have been around for quite a while. If you remember Islamic FinTech 4 or 5 years ago, there were only a handful groups of startups or people dabbling within the Islamic FinTech space. But fast forward to 5 years later, we have more than 100 successful and sustainable companies that are operating within the ecosystem and contributing value and providing the services and products that the consumers require. Okay, so we are very fortunate today to have Shakir Hashim from Wahid Invest, as well as Muhammad Sulman from Pay Halal. They have been around in the industry for a while. So we are very fortunate to actually find and get some time from their very busy schedule to come and speak to us in this wonderful Tuesday morning in Malaysia. I'm based out of Singapore as well, actually. It's a sunny day in Singapore. I hope wherever you are, the weather is good. You are staying safe and healthy as we fight this COVID-19 pandemic. Inshallah, you will get your vaccination in the days to come or the weeks to come. And as we embark on Ramadan next week, everybody remains healthy so that we can complete the month-long ibadah and achieve the success that we plan for ourselves. Okay, so maybe what I can do now is to not introduce the speakers today, but to let them introduce themselves because they can only do themselves justice. Let me start with Mr. Shakir Hashim from Wahid Invest. Could you please maybe describe a little bit about what your company is doing or has done, and what role do you play within your company? And then as well, maybe share a little bit about your journey with Wahid Invest. Please, Mr. Shakir.
All right, thanks, Dr. Haziq. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to one and all. My name is Shakir Hashim, and I'm currently the head of Asia Pacific for Wahid Invest. So I hope most of you are already clients, but if you're not, let me just explain what Wahid Invest is. So basically, we are a digital investment manager. So we provide a mobile application where everyday Muslims around the world can be recommended through our algorithms a diversified and Sharia compliant investment portfolio, and you can start investing into Sharia compliant index funds from as low as 100 ringgit in Malaysia or 100 USD in other parts of the world. We make it simple for you to dollar cost average and invest for the long term in a Sharia compliant way. So that's basically Wahid. My role at Wahid as the head of APAC was I joined Wahid in 2017. The company was earlier launched in 2016 in the US. The company is headquartered in New York. That is the first country where we launched in, the United States, where we are licensed as an investment advisor. 2018, we then expanded to United Kingdom, where we launched the same services and app. And in 2019, in October 2019, we launched Wahid Invest Malaysia. So Wahid Invest in Malaysia is the first Islamic digital investment manager licensed by the Securities Commission Malaysia. And to date, we are, I believe, the one and only Islamic digital investment manager licensed by the SC in Malaysia. So that has been generally the journey. My role was to set up the Malaysia office, which is also acting as the Asia Pacific hub, and of course to grow the Malaysia business to what it is today. At the same time, my concurrent role is also to grow our business in the Asia Pacific region through partnerships and direct entry into certain markets. That's about it, Dr. Haziq. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shakir, for that short and sweet introduction to what you do as well as what Wahid is doing currently. On to next to our next speaker, Mr. Muhammad Solwan. Could you please enlighten us in your journey as well as what Pay Halal is doing and your role within Pay Halal? Please.
Thank you very much, Haziq. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So you can address me as Wan. So of course I'm going to start by doing some sales job for my company right now. So Pay Halal is naturally an Islamic FinTech focusing on merchant acquiring and inshallah moving forward to the likes of issuing and also remittance. So we are proud to say that we are the first and the only Sharia attested Islamic payment gateway. So our job here is to ensure Sharia compliant in your payment, every merchant that they're accepting. And of course, at the end of the day, ensuring that there is no any integrity issue in related to halal product purchase. So of course, that's in a nutshell. I would love to open up my sales proposal, but yeah, let's move on to myself. I am currently the acting CEO in Pay Halal, also better known as Suka FinTech Startup. My role over here is to manage day-to-day operation. Of course, my forte is more towards compliance and risk, but I'll be managing operations and also day-to-day activity, including sales conversion, merchant acquiring, and also product development. But I guess I will explore further on Pay Halal as we go further along the questions.
And how did you get to working for Pay Halal, if you don't mind sharing? How do you get to work for Pay Halal?
Okay.
Your journey towards Pay Halal, yeah.
My
and what were
journey
you doing before?
I started off in PayPal. That's my first fintech experience. I started off in PayPal and I was moving in various departments. Of course, started off in claims department, moving on to compliance, sanctions, risk. And then finally, I was in a remittance company for a short while as a risk executive, individual contributor, before I was pinched to Pay Halal to spearhead the compliance and risk side.
I see. Very interesting. And in what year did you join Pay Halal?
2019.
Okay. Very good. And Pay Halal was launched in which year?
Okay, Pay Halal as a concept is started in late 2015, early 2016. Of course, we naturally, because we want to make sure it's fully Sharia compliant, we took another 2 years and Alhamdulillah, we launched in 2019 actually.
Okay, cool. And I think Pay Halal is one of the highly used payment systems in Malaysia as well.
Inshallah, yes, they are, and hopefully globally.
Okay. So my next question to Mr. Shakir is, can you describe to us what are the top 3 things that you think has made your company successful so far? Because I think a lot of the participants today, when they join with a topic like how to start an Islamic fintech, I think what they want to know is from experienced people who have built startups from the ground up. They wanted to know, what are the key takeaways and what were the things that actually worked. Of course, there were many things that fail. Just like in any startup, anyone who has built any startup, there are things that fail and there are things that work. So maybe Mr. Shakir, you can share the top 3 things that you think that has worked for Wahid Invest.
Yeah, sure. I think first and foremost, we wouldn't have gotten here if our group didn't have the clear vision and strong fundamentals in terms of principles. We are very clear about our business model, that we want to serve everyday Muslims, also known as retail investors, Sharia compliant investment portfolios, right? And we stand by that. As you are building a company, oftentimes you get pulled in various directions. When you're desperate for funds, when you're desperate for talent, people tend to question your principles and make you do things that are not aligned with your principles, right? Just because they have certain resources that you need. But because we have that clear vision, because we have clear principles from the top all the way down to in the organization chart, what it means is that we are very clear on what we do and what we don't do. And we have said no to many people offering us money, offering us advice, because they stray away from our principles of Sharia compliant investing and Sharia compliance as a whole in running the company. So that's number 1. Number 2 would be a strong shareholder base. I can't deny it. Wahid has been blessed and we are very grateful to have brought in a very strong set of shareholders. So backing our Series A round and our earlier rounds as a set of angel investors, Muslim angel investors, or even non-Muslim alike who believe in the Islamic finance space, plus venture capital companies who are backing us. So for example, Saudi Aramco's Entrepreneurship Ventures, their VC fund, backed us in our latest round. Cultivate, Dubai government's VC fund, also backed us. So without this set of shareholders who are aligned with us in terms of our vision and principle, I don't think we will get as far as we have gotten today. And we are very grateful for that. And lastly, I think getting the right hires is very tough. And I think we have been grateful that because I think we had the clear vision, because we had certain principles, we managed to attract talents from various esteemed institutions, like our head of portfolios, Samim. We enticed him to join Wahid out of Google. So he was managing Google's public investments. And before that, it was at JP Morgan. So to pull talent like that, having a clear vision and clear set of principles really helped, because as fintech companies, you can't really pay what Google is paying. But there needs to be something more than money, I think, which is satisfaction, right? You want to make sure that your work, your day-to-day going to office is an ibadah. So you want to make sure it's Sharia compliant. And I think that is something we provide to everyone in our organization.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's very good to hear, because, the constant thing that I hear from startups is being able to find the talent to join their team, and so that they can grow their team the way they have envisioned their startups to grow. So wonderful sharing, Mr. Shakir. And Mr. Shakir has emphasized on the top 3 things that work for him and as well as Wahid Invest, which is the clear vision, principles and core values of any startup or any company for that matter. And number 2 is having a strong shareholders, investors and people that believe in them, and picking the right type of investors to share the vision and goals that they plan to achieve and want to achieve. And then lastly, it's of course attracting the best talent and hires. So that's art and science in itself. I think it also works with the branding of the company and the strength of the vision of the company that's pulls people on board. And of course, the values that you share and the goals that you want to achieve from a career perspective. So thank you very much, succinctly and wonderfully encapsulated in the top 3 things that worked at Wahid Invest. Can I pose the same question to Pay Halal, Mr. Muhammad Sulwan?
Certainly, yeah. I was like, I'm here to be Christian anyways. But okay. Well, of course, to start with, I agree with Shakir. It's always the right vision, the right team members, the right investor backing you up. But I think in addition to that, how it works, how it helped Pay Halal, in addition to all that mentioned, is one is perseverance. So the perseverance we had, I mean, we have the right team, alhamdulillah. We have the right investors, alhamdulillah. We have the right vision and direction. But how it helped further is each team member, each investors, and each part member of the team work as a family. Well, of course, it's a bit cliche. We work as a family, right? But nevertheless, we have the right perseverance, and we know what we are heading towards to. So, of course, when the going gets tough, we take on the tough gets going, and that's one area, the perseverance. Secondly, is of course to we started focusing on the direction. Like Pay Halal, our direction has always been to cater to the underserved category. In addition to ensuring that the transaction is Sharia compliant, right? So naturally, ours is more of how we make sure the balance in between ensuring business goes on as usual, so that people like me can be paid, and at the same time we are able to balance out with this other category where we want to serve the underserved, so that they are not affected with high pricing, they are not affected with all the unnecessary expenses, for them to make sure that they can convert to digital aspect of business, and at the same time proceed with their daily income. On a third basis, I think I mentioned this a lot, and I have to mention this again, as like I have wonderful team members. So it'll be a scene, although after Shakir mentioned them, if I don't mention my team members, like each of them, not complaining when I ask for a lot of things, not avoiding my calls when I call them. So that's superpower by itself. So I think that's the top 3 thing from Pay Halal itself.
Very cool, very cool. So for Pay Halal and Wan, he mentioned number 1, perseverance, number 2, commitment, and then number 3, teamwork. So I think on top of what Mr. Shakir has mentioned, I think these are the values and the kind of, in the startup space, we call it the hustle, right? The work ethics, the hustle, the commitment, the ability to work with different people with different skill sets, and when everything comes together, you have a formula for success. So this is what we can take away today from our speakers at Wahid Invest and Pay Halal. Let me go on to my next question. Having covered the key ingredients which I think will make not only a fintech company or an Islamic fintech company successful, let me pose this scenario to both our speakers. We have a lot of great ideas within the community, whether it's the Islamic fintech community or the fintech community at large, because MDEC, looks over the entire ecosystem, as do other government agencies in various ecosystems all around the world. And we have callers from all around the world in this session. Can you share little pointers that you know that every startup founder will actually have to overcome in their various stages of building their ventures as they want to reach their goal of building a successful fintech, as both of you have done. In those dark days where it is tough for them to, for instance, they always struggle with capital raising, right? They always, and then it's always one thing or another, right? When you don't, when you have a great team, you don't have the capital. When you have the capital, you struggle with team members leaving for better pastures, or they fall out, not believing in the original goal that started everything and things like that. So what are the things that you can advise new startup founders who may be listening in right now as to how to overcome this very complex and different sets of problems as you try to run a workable team and achieve the goals that you have mapped out in your roadmap for success? Mr. Shakir, if you don't mind to start with this question.
Yeah, Dr. Aziz, thanks. Very loaded question. To unpack it, maybe what I can say is that at every stage of a fintech company or building whatever company, I was a founder myself. I founded Sekolah Fund previously, which we sold to a large crowdfunding company in Indonesia. So I understand the pains of being a founder, and I feel somewhat my current role as an intrapreneur is also like a founder. We set up the office from scratch, licensing from scratch. So I think the most important key that any leader needs to have in building a tech company, regardless it's fintech or not, is clarity. You need to be clear and extremely clear about the vision at that point of time. So for example, we have the big vision, right? We want to be like the biggest investment house for retail investors globally. But at this phase, right, what is most important to your company? So if you're starting out, right, and you're saying that you do not have capital, you have to ask yourself, why do I not attract capital? Right? Because you are not being the talk of the town. Like money follows hype most of the time, right? And that's unfortunate, but that is the reality. Islamic fintech for the longest time hasn't been attracting a lot of capital, especially from the conventional side. But kudos to our friends in Indonesia, right? Alami Sharia, they raised funds from supposedly conventional VCs, and they've shown that it's possible. So why is it possible for them? It's because I believe they are on a rocket ship, right? They have the numbers, right? They have the growth that backs, funding. Like you are so good that they can't ignore you, right? Whatever your religious beliefs are, whatever your market is, as long as it's ethical, people cannot ignore if you are growing like a rocket ship. So the clarity that you should have as a leader of a fintech company at whatever stage is to know that your main job is to prove growth, right? And what growth are we talking about? At the very least, 20% month on month, right? To show that you're on a rocket ship. If you are not delivering the numbers, of course, people will not come to you with capital, with resources. So how then do you get growth with very minimal resources? That's the mark of a great entrepreneur. You got to figure that out.
Sorry. And how did you figure that out at Wahid Invest collectively?
So our group CEO, Junaid, before he started Wahid, right, in 2016, he spent the whole 2015 just traveling to various countries where Islamic finance is huge and networking with everyone. Just getting to know who's who, the Islamic bankers, the Islamic fund houses, VCs, conventional VCs with Muslim partners, people who can align with you somehow, right? He spent the entire year networking and building a map of who's who and how do we jump from one resource to the other to scale this company. So I think that was key in building Wahid, the relationships. And then when I joined, I brought in the relationships with local regulators, local partners, and I think the big part of making sure that you are successful is that you're plugged into an ecosystem where you have the requisite relationships to make things happen. Business is relationships. You cannot think that with a great idea you can suddenly be good. Possibly you can, right? But again, remember who is Mark Zuckerberg's mentor, right? They all part of an ecosystem. Advice and money is built out of relationships. That is something I can share.
Okay, wonderful. Mr. Muhammad Sulwan, do you have anything to add to that?
I think this is where me and Shakir start to disagree. As I mentioned in the beginning, my forte has always been on a compliance perspective. So I think what's fundamental for a startup, as much as I agree with Shakir that the investment is important for you to have the hype for people to be investing with you and everything, I think first to start with is a proper framework. not only on your direction, but a proper regulatory framework. We are talking about a highly regulated space here, which is fintech. So of course, there's a lot of dangers. There's a lot of risk where a small a small hiccup may cause a huge fine and whatnot. That's one, right? From regulatory perspective. Of course, second, we are talking about we are going out there and we are going, of course, we have the likes of reputational risk over here when you proclaim that you're doing something Sharia compliant wise. But nevertheless, if it's not backed up accordingly, there's no proper transparency. As much as it affects the business, it also affects future other upcoming business within the Islamic space itself. In Malay term, purely to be translated, it will be like you're riding on the religion, right? Quite famous in Malaysia. Nevertheless, I think what is fundamental at the end of the day, the first step to look at is your framework and your compliance itself. Once you have that sorted right, because we are talking about a framework where it acts as your spine. Once your spine is straight, it's impossible for you to be unable to stand up straight. And then you follow up with hype, you follow up with the necessary press release, you follow up with the necessary placement of your product, awareness, it'll pull in investors. And then you get more money, you do R&D, and then of course the R&D you stick back, make sure it's in compliance with whatever framework that you have built, whatever structure you have. And then further press release, further investment, further expansion from maybe a state to country to a continent and global. So I think I'll be standing firm with my decision that regulatory framework compliance comes first, because it's always good management that brings in good money. As much as good money can come first, it'll never bring in good management and it's not sustainable.
Okay, wonderful. I think it's good to hear many different perspectives. I don't actually see it as disagreements. The reason why I love talking to startup founders is because everybody has their own perspectives, and as the more varied they are, I think, especially when there's an audience listening in, I think there's more to learn for everyone. I think different perspectives come from different experiences and the different roles that you play at the different startups that you run. I think that's absolutely fine. You don't need to apologize for disagreeing or having a different opinion or perspective. I actually welcome, more varied opinions as much as we can possibly have. Of course, you don't want to be different just for the sake of being different. There has to be some kind of basis and things like that. So even in the Islamic finance context, we have different mazhabs and different opinions and different fatwas, for the simple reason that within our framework of Islamic beliefs and faith is that we are inclusive to valid and reasonable and rational opinions from every party, provided you can you can back it up with sound arguments and sound reasoning. We accept all kinds of opinions, right? Because we are open that way. So wonderful, feedback from both our speakers. I think it's almost like you are sharing years of experience that a lot of the listeners listening in can actually use immediately after this talk. Okay, so being founders and being part of a startup ecosystem, can you possibly, one of my strong interests, apart from writing down the ideas that I have for to grow the Islamic ecosystem, not only the fintech ecosystem, right, but the Islamic economy is made up of various sectors outside of finance. The other thing that really is close to my heart is in the startup space. So if some of my questions seem to be a little bit repetitive, please forgive me. But I really have to ask this question. I would like both of you to share things that you think that are very important to anyone considering starting their own startup, especially those that they are already in a very comfortable job. They are good at it. They've done it for several years. But human beings being human beings, right? There is something that's always niggling at the back of their mind, especially when they have a spark of entrepreneurship within them, and they feel like there is more to life than just 9 to 5 or 8 to 5, whatever job that depending on the schedule of your job. Going in, serving customers, doing what the bosses tell them to do, because that's the KPI that's going to be measured against at the end of every annual year or fiscal year. But they have they think they have a wonderful idea at the back of their mind, and they are maybe hedging and thinking about, should I leave all this comfort, all this stability behind? My family is doing fine because my pay is good. I don't really need to move on, but I don't want to be 60 or 70 someday, wake up and then regret that I did not pursue this particular idea that I had for a wonderful startup that could benefit society and maybe even fulfill themselves as a human being or as an entrepreneur first. Maybe this time we start with Muhammad Sulwan first, and then I'll get back to you, Mr. Shakir, just to shake things up a little bit.
So the table have turned. I'm okay. Of course, to start with, I am a firm believer of not sitting in a comfort zone. At the same time, I believe firmly on not dropping everything you have in order to start something new with uncertainty. Similar to not packing all your eggs in one basket, not jumping into a puddle with both your legs and everything. Now, naturally, when you have a great idea, when you have an idea within Islamic space, again, I think it is fair to say this is my personal opinion instead of my organization's opinion, because this is what brought me from the beginning, from PayPal and all. Oh my God, I'm being targeted for questions. Okay, nevertheless, I'm a firm believer of whatever you want to do starts with nawaitu first, right? It starts with nawaitu, especially in Islamic space. It's an obligation. We're talking about an obligation to the ummah, an obligation to yourself, an obligation of the society. So you start off with nawaitu in sense of what are you starting off with? The common practice that is happening right now, sad to say, if you're looking at the industry, is once someone starts a particular business which is doing fine and everything, you automatically start the business in order to chase the money, right? Naturally, for me, it's always about filling in the gap, because the whole idea, even when Pay Halal started, the whole idea is to fill in the gap where there are certain groups being left out. That's first to start with. You're on our way to. Secondly, of course, I'm going to stick to my compliance, which I mentioned earlier. I'm not going to repeat myself.
Sorry to interrupt you. For the non-Muslims that are listening in, nawaitu means the intention. Okay, go ahead, please. Sorry.
Yep. Thank you very much for that, Azik. It's like I almost missed that out, right? Well, it's your intention to start with. What are you going to do with this? Is it entirely money making? Is it entirely for the people, or if it's a little bit of both? If it's entirely money making, I think I'm not in the right place to advise further. Of course, we have Shakir from Wahid Invest. His portfolio suits better for that area. Nevertheless, on my perspective, it's more of you are sitting in a comfort zone. You have an idea. The first thing to is to check what is the necessity of the idea that you're bringing in. So would you need to build a whole scratch? Because at the end of the day, for some weird reason, we have an issue to collaborate with others. So again, it's my personal opinion. I'm not representing my personal opinion. How I see things is, if you have A and your friends or partners have B and C and D, instead of you building A, B, C, D, you can just work together, collaborate, and work out a consortium, where instead of only serving a small group, you can serve a bigger group. And in this sense, of course, being realistic, some of us are married, some of us still are staying with our parents. We have our commitments. We got bills to pay every end of the month. So 9 to 6 is where you work for your company because you're being paid for that. And you have to make sure that you're not stealing from your company by stealing the time. 6 to 12 is where you work on yourself and your ideas. I think in summary, that should sum it, inshallah.
Wonderful. So you are advising those guys who are sitting on the fence to actually divide the time where they are working, they are paid for their regular job, and then after work they work on this idea much further, with the vision that someday, if the idea is firmed up or materialized or has advanced to that stage, then they can decide to fully pursue it.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful advice, Mr. Wan. You brought up a very common problem that everybody is talking about, the problem with cooperation and collaboration. I'm not trying to play the devil's advocate here, but I think the answer is fairly obvious, but I wanted to know what is your personal opinion as to why we fail to cooperate and collaborate when, like you said, right, the benefits of cooperation and collaboration is fairly obvious.
I'm here representing my entity and being a guy within the risk space, right? I'm very concerned about my reputational risk. But nevertheless, I have to repeat back again on a personal perspective, right?
Right.
On
Just your personal opinion, right? Nothing to do with pay halal, just one's personal opinion on this particular situation.
I need to give you the full sentence like I'm reading out Miranda rights. This is my personal opinion, not representing my entity. Again, I believe at the end of the day, the reason we are unable to work together is we don't realize one whole cake can't be digested by one person. But oftentimes, we can call it greed, we can call it overconfidence, we can call it the fact that you always like to bite more than what you can chew. But when you don't realize that the cake can be divided into 4 slices, 8 slices, or 12 slices to be shared, you will often have issue to collaborate. I think purely on the fact that you are trying to bite more than what you can chew.
Wonderful. I think you hit the hammer on the head, and it ties in nicely with the spirit of being Islamic and running a truly Islamic FinTech company. So, Mr. Shakir, what advice do you have for people who are still sitting on the fence and they are getting lulled into non-action from the comfort in their lives, but there is a spark somewhere that they are contemplating to pursue? What advice do you have for them, Mr. Shakir?
Yeah, I think I believe no one should be forced into entrepreneurship. It's either you have it in you to want to do it or you don't. Like, you don't go into entrepreneurship hoping for a safety net, right? It's all in. It's all in. Like, even for me, when I was building my own fintech company in the past, it was all in. Like, it's either we exit or we shut down the company at a certain point of time. You have to have a deadline, because what I've seen is many people, they are like zombified companies, right? And with all due respect, they put in a lot of effort and they are capable at what they do. But I think Paul Graham of Y Combinator put it nicely. He said, if you're not growing, you're default dead, right? And default dead because venture funding comes in with growth, right? And you need venture funding to grow. right? You can bootstrap, but in fintech, let's say you want to open a DIM, a digital investment manager in Malaysia, you have to lock up 2 million ringgit, right? How are you going to raise 2 million ringgit unless your father is rich or you manage to pull in venture funding? So that's one part, right? So one, you shouldn't be forced into it. You should want to do it and should commit all the way. But I think to answer the question about mid-career professionals, right, deciding whether they should go into entrepreneurship or not, there's two paths. One is the founder track, one is the tech executive track, like where I am right now. I was a founder and now I'm a tech exec. So if you want to go down the founder track, right, make sure you really want to do it, right? And you're committed to at least set aside 5 years to make it happen, right? And what you can do before you jump out of your company is to de-risk your business idea, right? You can get a proof of concept done at night, right? When you're off work, get users, get like a few hundred users, prove that they need what you want, what you're offering. And as you have your proof of concept, your waiting list is growing. Those are good reasons for you to raise a pre-seed round. So talk to angel investors. Get some money for a 12-month runway that pays your livelihood, right? Pays for your children's education, your house, your food, so on and so forth. Not of luxury, but just enough for 12 months. That 12 months, build a small team, grow your business to a point where you are ready for a seed round, right? So that is one way, de-risk your business idea. Secondly is to build relationships, right? Ecosystem partners, regulators, and potential investors, build the relationship with them. Many people are led to believe, Dr. Haziq, that funding is when you pitch and then you get a check right after the pitch. It never ever works like that. Maybe once in a while when you're in Y Combinator or you're in Silicon Valley where money is overflowing. Down here, right, money is not overflowing. So let me tell you how we raise funds. It's a relationship. You start talking to someone today, you probably convince them to invest 3 to 6 months down the road, and you got to be ready for that. You shouldn't raise money when you run out of cash. That is the worst place to start fundraising. Fundraise when you don't need the cash, because you're not asking for money from a point of desperation. So those are some things that I can say about the founder track.
Wow, fantastic. These gems and diamonds worth of advice coming from Mr. Shakir himself, who has done both the founder and the tech exec track. He's doing the tech exec track at Whitehead Invest, but he was a founder at Scholar Fund. If you guys are plugged into the Islamic FinTech ecosystem, you would know what the Scholar Fund has done and is continuing to do for the education industry. Okay, so let me quickly sum up because there are gems and diamonds that has just been, discussed here. Number one is Mr. Shakir's advises mid-career professionals or people who are still sitting on the fence and thinking about embarking on their own startup. He says that there are two tracks for you to do, the founder track as well as the tech exec track. That means to join a running startup already. And then he says that you should do two things. Number one, which is to de-risk, before you de-risk your actions before you decide to embark on your own startup or to join another startup. And number two is to build relationships, because that is going to help you in your venture. So under de-risk, he says that first of all, it is very important for you to build a proof of concept, or for the layman is to build a prototype. And then he says that once you have a prototype and you are able to get a few hundred people to use this particular prototype to prove that there is a need for this concept, or people will pay for this concept, or people will use this concept, then you can maybe convince your friends or people to fund you pre-seed so that you can actually hire some people to build that idea a little bit further, and then to build even more traction. Because he says that when you want to raise capital, like in all fintech companies who need to raise capital because it's capital intensive, you have to show growth, right? And he gave an inkling of what growth means, like 20% a month in his previous answers. That there is something like a thumb rule. You don't have to stick to it, tightly, but it is a thumb rule or heuristic that he's letting us know. So the key idea is to show growth every month. Once you have a solid team, a solid idea, backed up by solid traction, that implies solid growth, it is easy for you to raise capital. But of course, he advises us that while we are embarking on raising capital, we shouldn't be in this fantasy world where you meet the venture capitalist, or you present your business idea to him, or your pitch deck or your roadmap to him one time, and you expect to get a check at the end of that presentation. This is highly unrealistic, according to Mr. Shakir, and according to my experience, I absolutely agree with him. It is in building relationships. I've wrote a document for ASEAN Secretariat. I was commissioned to do this document in 2017, where it was a handbook for alternative finance. I put together all the different types of VCs and PEs for different stages of startup growth for the ASEAN startup community, so that they can reach out to these active venture capitalists and private equities and funders they may want to fund in their particular startup. And I've categorized them in different areas of focus that the different funders are focused in. Mr. Shakir adds to that very importantly, or very crucially, when he says that having such a document or handbook is not enough, because you need to reach out to these people and you need to build a relationship with them, right? Only when you build a long-term relationship will they actually get to see and feel your team, as well as get to see the traction that you have built, and get to see firsthand the passion that you feel for the startup that you're trying to build. I think those are very, very valuable advice coming from both our speakers today. I am very, very fortunate to be able to be asking these kind of questions to our esteemed speakers, as well as to our honorable audience that has put aside an hour of their busy schedule this morning, wherever you are, to listen to such gems that are being shared by our esteemed speakers. It is 10:55. There are some questions in the chat box which are not answered. Maybe let me spend this last 5 minutes to pick one or two questions, and then I will open the question to both of the speakers so that they can respond. Okay, maybe I take this common questions that has been asked and has been the subject of some conferences and some call for chapters and call for papers. I think it's a fairly common question to ask, and I would just like to know the opinions of both of our speakers today. Unfortunately, I apologize to the audience because I can't pick up every question that I see in the chat box. I'll just pick one because we have 4 minutes and I don't want to over exceed the time that's allocated to me. The question is, what are the effects of COVID-19 pandemic on Islamic FinTech startup companies? So I guess this question would be posed to your own FinTech company. What has been the effect over this past year since last March that we have encountered COVID-19? The lockdowns, the restricted movements, the travel ban, and the limited travel as we try to open up our travel space in the recent months. What kind of impact has it been on your particular startup? Let's come back and start with Mr. Shakir, and then we'll go to Mr. Sulwan.
Yeah, thanks for the question. In terms of the effects of COVID-19, I think we look at it at two levels. One is at the country level, where we launched the US, UK, and Malaysia. For these countries that we have already launched, how do I put it? Like COVID-19 has been quite difficult for most of us, right? In terms of our freedoms to move, our livelihoods and so on. But we are grateful and that there is some silver lining in COVID-19. Digitalization of finance has been sped up by COVID-19, at least from a Malaysia perspective, because people cannot go out to meet their mutual fund or unit trust consultants or agents. People cannot go to, the branches to make investments, So what they do is they've been looking at digital avenues. They have time, they're at home, they can't go to work, but salary is coming in, right? So money has to go somewhere. They can't shop, they can't travel. So investments became the talk of the town amongst retail investors, and we saw the effects. It was quite a significant growth for us throughout COVID. And I think it was the same for my peers in the conventional side. They also mentioned that during the lockdown period, numbers have seriously grown in terms of new clients and assets under management. That's on a country level. But there's also downsides to it. Like we've planned to open up a few countries this year, but because we can't travel, we can't meet regulators, we can't meet shareholders, that has been hampered. But inshallah, our friends in the UK, they are all vaccinated, so they can travel on behalf of us to get things done. And then we hope this year we will see Wahid launching in a few more markets globally, inshallah.
Ameen, inshallah. Mr. Sulwan, would you like to add on Pay Halal's perspective?
I think in addition, I think Shakir technically covered all the areas. As much as there's a spike, the pros of it, there's a spike and everything. The cons is the expansion has been limited. Where even for Pay Halal, we were supposed to set up Indonesian office, but due to the travel restriction and everything, it's not that it's not happening. It's happening at a slower pace. I think, but I think there's nothing more to add from Shakir's explanation, I believe.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. I think I am really grateful to have both of you on the session today. I think you have made the session very, very useful to all our listeners, and we have recorded it. So to the future listeners, there are many key takeaways and many lessons they can glean from the discussion that we had over this past hour. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Muhammad Sulwan and Mr. Shakir. All the best in your venture building, and I'm sure that we'll hear more of growth from Wahid Invest as well as from Pay Halal in the coming years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Haziq. If I may just add, I know there's 2 questions that is owed upon me. So I've dropped my email, and you can reach out directly on my LinkedIn. I'll love to entertain that and discuss further about it. I apologize, I'm unable to do it over here right now.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for your generosity to do that, Mr. Sulwan.
It's a pleasure.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, speakers.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. And look out for our next program that we'll be doing with MDEC, and we'll be bringing you more exciting events in the coming months. We'll take a break in the month of Ramadan, and maybe about a week or 2 for Raya celebration, and then we'll continue to provide and bring you the relevant events that will be useful for all of you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and Ramadan Kareem, everyone.
Assalamualaikum.